Marvel's The Winter Soldier has been both friend and foe to Captain America, and today we're sharing our list of 7 things you may not have known about him on this episode of Listed. Movie audiences were first introduced to James Bucky Barnes in 2011's Captain America: The First Avenger, only to see him perish in the battle against the evil Red Skull. 3 years later, he was resurrected as the deadly title assassin for Captain America: The Winter Soldier. His journey from best friend to international terrorist is a pretty crazy one, and today we're sharing a few facts about Steve Rogers' oldest BFF, starting with number 1, death becomes him. A running joke in the comic books is that no one ever really stays dead, and that, of course, is the case of Bucky Barnes, but it took a long time for him to be resurrected. For the longest time, there were only a handful of characters that were considered permanently dead. That list includes Spider-Man's Uncle Ben, Gwen Stacy, Jason Todd, aka the Second Robin, and Bucky Barnes. His death came way back in 1964 in Avengers number 4, and it remained untouched for over 40 years. The main reason for his long departure from the comic world was the fact that he died during World War II, and he had never appeared in the current Marvel Universe. His death had such an impact on modern-day Captain America that it seemed like reviving him wouldn't mess up his man-at-a-time origin, considering Cap's last memory before being frozen was his best friend's death. While some writers had considered bringing Bucky back to life, it wasn't until Ed Brubaker created The Winter Soldier in 2005 that made it a reality. Number 2, die another way. While Bucky's death at the end of World War II is one of the most famous in comic lore, it's actually a story that was retconned decades later. After World War II, Captain America's popularity waned as comics began focusing more on science fiction and horror through much of the 1950s. Bucky's storyline ended in 1948, where he was shot but survived. He was briefly revived along with Captain America to fight communists in 1954, but this series only lasted a few issues. While Stan Lee decided to revive Captain America a decade later, he created a story involving Cap being frozen in ice while stopping a missile during the end of the war. Bucky died during this event, while Cap ended up in suspended animation until being found by the Avengers years later. And unfortunately, this clashed with the Captain America comics of the 1950s, so a story was created to explain which claimed that Cap and Bucky were from those stories were actually 2 different men pretending to be the iconic heroes in order to keep the nation's morale up. Confused? Yeah, welcome to the world of comics. Number 3, a Bucky by any other name. If Bucky's death being reckoned didn't confuse you, maybe this will. When he was first created, comics were targeted mostly to young boys, and it was believed that including a teenage sidekick made the main heroes more relatable to young viewers. That's why Batman, a tortured man who stalks the night as a violent vigilante, hangs out with a kid in a brightly colored costume. That's also the same reason why Captain America, a soldier fighting in the actual war, had a teenage sidekick tagging along with him into enemy territory. Bucky's original origin was that he was an orphan who lived on an army camp and has become one of the base's mascots. Well, when he accidentally walked in on Steve Rogers while he was changing into his uniform, he forced Cap to make him his sidekick in exchange for keeping Steve's identity a secret. It's a silly story, which is why it was changed over time eventually. And Bucky was slowly changed from being the camp's mascot to just being a kid who lived on the base. It was then established that Bucky had received army training and had survival skills, making it less insane to bring a kid into the war zone. Of course, even that origin was changed, with it later being revealed that Bucky was never a camp mascot and was just a cover story. In reality, Bucky was a trained commando who went on missions to do the dirty work Captain America could not be seen doing. This completely wiped out the whole teen sidekick angle, which was now only just fake propaganda tool that the army used. When Bucky finally made the leap to the big screen, the teen persona was completely scrapped, and he was just a soldier and a childhood friend of Steve Rogers. Number 4, resurrections are tricky. Bringing Bucky back to life was a tough task. In the original comics and film, Captain America finds himself coming face to face against a mysterious Russian assassin known only as the Winter Soldier, only to realize that it's actually his old friend Bucky Barnes. In the comics though, Cap's initial encounter with the Winter Soldier saw Captain America coming into possession of an artificial cosmic cube known as the Tesseract in the MCU. Typically, this is a device with unlimited power, but being artificial, it was flawed. Cap only had the ability to perform one action with it and decided to use it to restore Bucky's memories with the Winter Soldier. Writer Ed Brubaker meant for this to be the definitive return of Bucky Barnes, but he accidentally created a loophole. Before the Cosmic Cube, the Winter Soldier showed no signs of being Bucky in the comics, and it was only believed that his body had come from Bucky's corpse. When Cap used the Cosmic Cube, some fans realized it is possible that instead of returning his old memory, the cube may have just made the Winter Soldier believe that he was actually Bucky Barnes. Now, considering that this was a man who had been continuously wiped and brainwashed for over 50 years, it's not too much of a stretch to believe he's just currently brainwashed and not really Bucky after all. Number 5, a Black Widow connection. When the writers of the comics realized that Bucky had been under the control of the Russian government for a significant period of time, they decided to connect him to another popular Marvel hero, Black Widow. As a former citizen of Russia, Widow was an easy connection to make, and it's revealed that under the training of the Red Room, Natasha Romanova was instructed by the Winter Soldier and had a brief romance. Years later, when Bucky had broken free from control, he and Widow reconnected. Considering that Black Widow plays a significant part in the movies and her past with the Red Room has been established, it's possible that the two characters will end up sharing a connection on the big screen as well. Number 6, Ed Brubaker makes a cameo. The Winter Soldier was first introduced during Ed Brubaker's run on Captain America, and while he can't claim ownership of Bucky, he was the writer that credited him into turning him into the Winter Soldier. So it was only fitting that Brubaker made a cameo in this film. Even more fitting is the role he played. Brubaker can also be briefly seen playing one of the scientists responsible for creating the Winter Soldier and can be spotted during the scene where Alexander Pierce gives the Winter Soldier his orders. Number 7, the next Captain America? While we can look forward to Chris Evans taking on the role of Captain America for at least a few more films, there will come a time when he decides to hang up the shield, and while Marvel could decide to recast the role, a more likely scenario is another character will take up this mantle. This has been the case in the comics, as there have been a number of different characters that have played Captain America. The biggest change came when Steve Rogers was assassinated following the events of the Civil War in the comics. The world needed Captain America to carry on, and Rogers had made it clear that Bucky was his choice to succeed him. Like most comic book characters, Rogers eventually returns from the dead, but even then, Bucky continued to fight as Captain America. It did become a little awkward when people learned that the current Captain America was actually a former assassin, but that's just part of the job sometimes. The movie has foreshadowed Bucky's potential new identity by showing the Winter Soldier utilizing Cap's shield, but we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. So now that you've seen our list of fun facts for the Winter Soldier, it's time to share yours. Head down to the comments below and drop some Winter Soldier knowledge on us, and then click right over here to find out which characters from the comic version of Civil War we're going to miss in the movie. I'm Sarah Whittle, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time with more Listed. Click to the left to find out what we want to see happen in this summer's Captain America Civil War, or click to the right for some of our favorite Easter eggs from the Marvel Cinematic Universe.